Psychotechnologies Live.
Welcome to another episode of Psychotechnologies Live. We have with us a very special guest. Her name is Maija Haavisto. She has written 18 books. Holy crap. It's a lot of books. She does internal family systems work, somatic work, metta work. She's a YouTuber and a Discord mod. Which is really interesting because from what I've seen, you have your own community, people that you practice with, and you guys help each other through stuff, which is pretty much like a modern day Sangha, right? So that's very cool. It's like the thing that everybody's like trying to move towards, Reiki calls community of practice. I think that's super cool. Like you're doing this in I guess a quiet way, or but maybe not quiet for you, but has it shown up quiet for me? I haven't heard you make a lot of noise about it. So very cool. You also do hypnosis as well, which is something that I don't know a lot about. Can you tell me a little bit about hypnosis? Like, what is it? What is it? Is it real? Like, what does it do? Why do you?
I feel like there's like an old hypnosis of like 70s and 80s where there'd be a guy on stage who'd make people into chickens and then everyone would clap and that would be the end. But there's obviously a real therapeutic one as well that we've developed since then.
I mean, like therapeutic hypnosis has been developed since the 19th century. It's basically the oldest Western type of psychotherapy. So, but it's not really like hypnosis. There are 15 theories of what it is. And some theories are like, well, people are just trying to do what the person says that they should do, or that hypnosis is not like a distinct state because suggestion always affects people, even outside of hypnosis. But there's pretty good evidence from brain imaging studies that hypnosis is in fact a distinct state. So, and I do believe that evidence. But there's a lot of misconceptions about hypnosis, and I guess most people are only familiar with stage hypnosis, which is of course focused on making people look silly. But therapeutic hypnosis is very different, and it's a large field that includes a lot of different stuff. Like hypnotherapy is not one school of therapy. You can do CBT hypnosis, cognitive behavioral therapy in hypnosis. You can do trauma therapy in hypnosis. You can do family therapy in hypnosis. You can do the usual, like you will find cigarettes disgusting stuff. But there are a lot of different techniques, and there are a lot of techniques that can be used. Like it's not just for psychotherapy. Like for me personally, one thing I find interesting is just relaxation, because hypnosis is very good for inducing very deep states of relaxation very quickly. And people tend to really enjoy those.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'm like, one thing I'm interested in is how do these all fit together? Like you've got the internal family systems as well as the hypnosis. If someone comes to you and they're like, I don't know how to hit the nail on the head of quitting smoking, as an easy example. Can you do the same work in hypnosis that you can do in IFS in terms of getting in touch with the part of someone that wants to do that thing and have a conversation with it? Are you hitting, if you're doing hypnosis, are you hitting the same part of their psyche through a different pathway, or is it hitting a completely different part of their psyche?
It's actually parts work in hypnosis is much older than IFS. Like it's been done for almost 100 years. So, and IFS is not the only form of parts work. There are many different types of parts work. But ego state therapy was one of the first, and it has been done both in hypnosis and outside of it. But it's funny, there are still some hypnotherapists that actually believe that you can only do parts work in hypnosis because otherwise you will encounter fake parts and not real parts.
I mean, that's interesting. I've encountered a lot of real parts just chatting to people and being like, oh, what part of you is that? Like, what part of you is doing that? And they're like, oh, this part over here that's screaming at me. Like, oh no, that's a real part. We're definitely like getting in touch with a real part, and then like moving a real part, sorting out a real part as we work with it.
But I have combined them a few times, not very often, but like hypnosis is good if someone struggles to say in self, or if there are parts that are really difficult to access and situations like that. I also have an audio on YouTube, which is like helps you get in touch with the difficult part. And of course, being an audio, it's not interactive. So it's not like actual IFS work. It's more like just letting you meet a difficult part or a part you consider challenging from self and kind of like just hanging out.
Okay, I'm interested in that. Like, we were talking earlier about how a lot of work requires like a community, or like you have to practice with other people, and that's the like at the extreme end you have actual people dynamically relating to you as you go, and at the other end is like you have a book someone has written about therapy, and as you read the book you feel some therapeutic work happening. In the middle you've got this like this audio recording where at least you can like how much is a real person needed for improvement and growth versus like, oh, you can just listen to the audio and do the hypnosis on your own.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And of course, hypnosis is one of those things where traditionally, like a lot of hypnotherapy has, like your therapist might record an audio for you, and then you listen to it at home, for example, trying to get rid of anxiety. And so it's a very traditional way of working. And YouTube is full of hypnosis audios for all kinds of purposes. And to be honest, many of them are really bad in my opinion, but it's still like, hypnosis is pretty effective. And even if some audio is not like objectively the best hypnosis audio, it can still be helpful.
Yeah, I met a guy who's like, where is train Twitter? How do I find? I bet there's like hypnosis Twitter as well, right? So like people who do.
It's not very large and it can be a bit weird, but yeah.
What makes something a good hypnosis or a bad hypnosis, like in your opinion?
I think a big problem with a lot of YouTube hypnosis is that those people speak very fast. And of course, it's a matter of taste. I know some people like very rapid paced hypnosis, and some people like very, very slow pace and lots of pauses. So of course, it's also like a matter of personal taste. But I've literally listened to some YouTube audios where I've had to like, okay, I'm not getting into trance. I'm just getting annoyed. I will have to turn this off because
I have successfully found my annoyance parts in this hypnosis, and I have successfully started working with them that I didn't know were there. I'm curious. One thing that I'm interested in is like, how much does someone need to be qualified in order to start working with some of these techniques? Like some modalities or some practitioners will exist. You need a professional. You can't go into your psyche without a professional. And other practitioners like Jay Early with IFS, his book is literally called Self-Therapy. And I mean, he also talks about it can be difficult going into your mind on your own because you just run into your own blocks. But how much do you feel like another person is needed, or a professional practitioner is needed, compared to like there are like peer coaching, like peer support groups, and they seem to do good work as well. How much do you feel like the professional is needed versus anyone can help you, like your friends can help you, versus like you can do it alone?
I think it really depends on the person. For example, for me, I don't really like, I need an IFS partner to be able to do IFS. And for me, the issue is that I'm so chronically fatigued that I need the other person to keep my sympathetic nervous system kind of alert. And if I try to do IFS on my own, I just usually can't hear my parts properly. But other people have different issues, like someone with a lot of dissociation, they might find that they just end up really dissociated or triggered if they do IFS on their own. But I also don't know people with a lot of trauma and dissociation who can do IFS on their own just fine. It's really complicated, but it's also interesting. Like in my book, I cite Eugene Genlin a lot. He's the guy who invented focusing, which is like I would say is like a basis of most modern self-therapy. And he actually felt that the therapy with your friends is safer than with a professional, because if you feel like, okay, this person isn't able to help me, you will just get up and leave. While if you have a bad therapist, you will be like, well, I don't think this is helping, but this guy is supposed to be really good, so I guess I will just stick it out.
So there's like that's interesting. There's like this like authority almost that people will give to therapists, and they'll sit through things that they don't want to sit through because they think that the therapist knows better, versus their friends, they can be like, fuck you, I'm out. And then, you know,
I feel like if I just ask for help, I may or may not get it from my friends. But as soon as I go to a professional and I ask for help and then it fails, I'm like, I've been abandoned by reality. Like, even the professionals don't know how to fix me. I'm more broken than anyone I've ever met. But if I ask my friends, I'm like, hey, do you know about this? They're like, here, try this. And then they're like, I don't know. Good luck. Maybe try look over here. I'm like, oh, that didn't hurt so much. I didn't get abandoned by reality. They tried, and then they maybe didn't work.
Yeah. But it's interesting that basically, like, most people who are not in this scene, they have never heard of self-therapy, because people think that you have to, like, therapy is for, you know, you're talking with someone who explains how to fix your problems. How could you do it on your own? And a psychotherapist will be like, well, therapy is about the therapeutic relationship. It's about transference and stuff. You can't do it on your own. Yet people are able to do it both on their own and with friends who have never studied this kind of stuff. And Genlin, he was a huge fan of peer work. And he, for example, he trained people with schizophrenia to counsel each other. People who were like hospitalized with psychosis, he had them work as each other's therapists in the 1970s. And I think that's really cool.
Well, the cool thing about that, the cool thing I see is that, like, other people with the same condition know what you're going through. And like, and suddenly, like, if I start working with someone with the same problem, this is like super secret therapeutic practitioner skills. If I start working with someone who has the same stuff, I'm like, oh, they can solve it, and then I can solve mine. Like, we worked it out over there, and then I can come back home and like fix my own shit in the same sort of way. So
to me, it's quite funny, and especially like even now, it's many people or many therapists feel like, for example, that schizophrenia is not really treatable with therapy because it's just like too severe. And it's kind of like a funny idea that, well, what if schizophrenia is actually better treatable by someone else who also has schizophrenia? So it's really like a very far out idea, but I really like that.
Yeah, that's something that I've been like thinking about actually a lot recently, because like I do notice the way that therapists or like professionals will talk about schizophrenics, and then like talking to them, and I'm like you guys have no idea what they're like, you can't relate properly. So I think they might be doing like a good job on like sort of that initial like education of, here's the prognosis, like here's how things sort of work, here's a bunch of, you know, like the comorbidity, very, you know, very like therapeutic, technical, like very informational. I think they do well. But then like actually trying to relate to someone with schizophrenia from their perspective, it's like it's I don't see how they can make things better. Like it's almost always like worse past like the first episode psychosis kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've guided quite a few people who also have psychosis, like guided IFS and shamanic work and imaginal practice. And to me, it's actually pretty cool because they tend to have a really good imagination. So their inner work is really inspiring and cool to observe because it's just like they are so good at imaginal work.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also going to cite this very cool study. It's actually not the study, but a review study done in the 1970s, I think, which reviewed a number of studies where they had either professionals or so-called para-professionals, so people who were not qualified to treat other people. And they found out that in no studies the professionals were better, but in some cases the not professionals were better at treating mental health issues. Mm. So it's quite, and I found this study a few months ago and it was like, okay, why have I never heard of this before?
Definitely makes me uncomfortable about thinking that I'm good at what I do or something. Wait, I'm pretty sure I'm good at what I do. And also, like, I talk to people and they're like, oh, I had this therapist and they were bad, or I tried to work on this and I couldn't work it out. And then, like, we're unlocking it, like, as we go in the session. And then I'm like, but wait a second, how do I have no skill if I also think I have skill?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff is like the mind sort of reorganizes itself, and a lot of the stuff I think we do is just providing an atmosphere or a container for people to either do the work themselves or for the mind to just naturally self-organize.
I like the idea of, like, in the beginning, maybe the support person has to be like, get out of bed. And then, like, after a while, the person's getting themselves out of bed. And so the support person needs to, like, step back and stop saying, get out of bed. Right. And then later, once they say get out of bed, they say, okay, now we need to sit down and do the work. But then there's like a falling away of the support where the person can be self-led eventually. The person can get to a place where they are mostly self-led, and then the support is switching to just witnessing them. And that seems like a really powerful, like, empowerment frame. Of the, like, transferring to the client the, like, self-leadership sort of quality of self-start or initiative, and then like ceding control, like the leader who can step back. It seems like a really important factor.
I've heard so many stories of bad therapists, and very often people who do IFS, they very often say, my latest therapist was so bad she couldn't even stay in self. So basically, like, if you do peer work and you can stay in self better than this, you're already like one step ahead.
I'm curious, like, I too have heard many stories of bad therapy, right? I'm like, how is it possible that there are so many bad therapists? And also, like, I think a lot of therapists are doing good work. What do you think is going on that's causing the, like, bad therapist phenomena? Is it people are just, the therapist is just triggered, or the therapist is just having a bad day, or the therapist and the client don't actually meet in a good therapeutic working relationship? Like, what is the cause of bad therapy?
I would say that often it's not being in self, because if you are in self, you're probably, like, doing at least something helpful. But I guess it's also to do with training. And just recently I've been thinking, because I've also been talking with people who have had bad IFS therapists, or not necessarily bad, but they have found very, like, concrete flaws in them. Bad IFS therapists and bad somatic experiencing therapists. And one common issue seems to be that this therapist has a very rigid idea of how IFS goes or how SE goes. And then this person is like, but this approach doesn't really work for me. What if you don't do this, but we do more of this? And this seems like it shouldn't be a big deal, then the therapist should be like, okay, let's try that. But somehow that then doesn't happen. So then there are these stories of the therapist trying to do this technique that doesn't work for this person over and over again. And the client obviously getting triggered and annoyed and feeling like I'm not being listened to because they are not.
That's super interesting, because I'm like, oh, I know that if my client in IFS is not like with this in their self, as in they're getting frustrated or they're getting resistant to the method, there's something coming up to be worked with. And at the same time, if the client doesn't like the method, we got a real problem in terms of, and like the therapy just works if you're in self. If you're open and curious and patient and compassionate, and you encounter a part of you that has been frustrating you for years, and you can stay open and curious, there will be movement there. If you can't stay open and curious, you can shut it down, shut yourself down, shut down the whole process. So I understand from the therapeutic lens, like if that therapist is like, no, we have to like go back into self first, and the client's like, no, let's just like, we have to go forward even though I'm frustrated, we're going to get a little bit of an impasse. But also like, I don't know, maybe the client knows what they want.
Like, for example, for me, a lot of the very basic IFS moves don't really work for me. And people who IFS, they often try to do them, and I'm like, yeah, this one just doesn't work for me. And
okay,
yeah,
like which ones? I want to know like which ones don't really work.
For example, retrieving, because my parts usually aren't in a place. So if I ask like, hey, do you want to get out of there? It doesn't make sense in my inner world.
This was a question that I had. I even asked Jay early about the shape of the inner world. Like when we do IFS, are we like uncovering parts that are there, or are we like creating parts in order to work with them, or are like is it a discovery or like a remindering? Like the parts were already there in this shape. If we didn't do IFS work, they'd still be there, or were they not there? And as we do IFS work, they reify into like a shape, and then they like dissolve after the therapy. And I don't think there's a good answer, and he couldn't really give me a clear, good answer. And I suspect it's because there isn't one.
Yeah. But I feel like he's like, obviously his books are very good, but they're also very prescriptive and really, like, you have to do it this and
step by step.
I don't really guide IFS like that. My own word doesn't work like that. And for example, there's someone who I guided SE for because IFS doesn't really work for him, or it triggers him too much. But he has had several professional SE therapists, but because most of the like official SE steps don't work for him, it doesn't work for him with those therapists. And I did things differently and it worked for him. And so he asked his therapist, like, can we do it like this? And they are like, no.
I mean, if I was working with someone and I was the client and they were like, let's follow this script, I would like stab them and walk away. I'd be like, nope. It's just like, if you want to get me to dislike the process, try and follow a script with me. Because I mean, call it a like rebellion against the rules, or like, I don't like being told what to do, but I just, my whole system is like no scripts.
Scripts.
The most horrible thing is that hypnotherapy regularly in the past, it used to be people reading scripts, like imagine therapy and someone reads like from a paper. Like,
now take a deep breath.
Then they read like, oh, your self-esteem is going to get better and better and better. And like, that's not therapy.
And I'm imagining like a therapist doing like a hypnosis and just like, you're getting better. We talked about being in self. For the audience, can we elaborate? What does it mean to be in self, and what does it mean to not be in self?
Yeah, so from an internal family systems perspective, being in self means that you're not in any part, you're not blended with any part. So you're not, for example, scared, anxious, angry, frustrated, feeling like, okay, this work should already be over. And because if you're not in self, usually you can't do IFS and you can't make progress with a lot of other therapy as well. And so in IFS, one way to check if you're in self is to ask yourself, how do I feel towards this part? And if you feel like, oh, I'm curious to hear what the part has to say, then you're in self. And if you feel like, oh, I wish this part wasn't here, then you're not in self.
Oh, interesting. So
Yeah,
it's like
I the way I frame this is like we're about to ask the part, what do you do? Right. And there's two ways to ask that question. One is the like, what do you do here? Like, what are you even doing here? And then there's the like, if I'm coming for the more curious compassion, like open place, is like, oh, what do you do? And the like, imagine being asked that, like from the part's perspective, like the interrogative, like shake, like, what do you do? Like they're not going to be nearly as open to like relating or being participatory in the process if you do that one than if you do the like open, curious, and like to understand sort of relating.
Yeah, kind of like real people.
Mm.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's like I guess the self, or like, would you call it like the true self?
It's usually referred to as the higher self, but sometimes like the core self, or like there's a branch of IFS that even goes like higher, the like God, like we can use God, like godly, like channel the godly compassion in order to work with a part. If someone is religious and has their own godly structures. But if they're not, then it's just usually called the higher self, and then we go from there.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
but in
like,
general, like being in self is not just for therapy. It's a very good principle. For example, if you are having a very difficult conversation with someone, if you are in self, you can really like, you're feeling spacious, compassionate, curious. You're really like interested in hearing what they actually have to say, instead of like, oh, I want to drown this person in my counter arguments. So it's and usually people can really like sense that you're being receptive and respectful and really like welcoming them as they are. But it's also people who are very traumatized are instead sometimes triggered by people being in self, which can be quite interesting.
Yeah, there's something like projection on, like a person who is calm, open, patient. It's very easy to project on them like secret motives, or like just anything, because they're such an open canvas that like they can be hit by any sort of projection.
Yeah, and it's really like before I didn't know what it was that someone could have an argument alone, but I've sometimes experienced this situation where I'm in self and there's another person who's like basically arguing and getting triggered and then accusing me of being triggered. I'm just calmly sitting there and they are just winding themselves up.
I'm
yeah,
interested in that aspect. Daniel, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I've seen that. Like there are people like in my communities or whatever, or adjacent, that like if I show up, like just like existing almost triggers them, without even me doing anything.
So this is something I'm interested in, because it seems like as I do more therapy, as I grow and mature in my capacity to dynamically exist, I can like walk over boundaries that other, like between, we were talking earlier before the call about the boundary between like rationality and alternative ways of being, like the non-scientific ways. I can just like travel between these spaces fairly comfortably. And I've met someone who is firmly in the rational side, and I like walked out of rational into weird, and then walked back, and then like immediately they were already triggered, and then I walked out again and walked back, and they were like, you know, how is it that I have this skill? And I think just having this ability to fluidly walk between the two is like threatening to their worldview, because I'm like, I can just do that. So as I grow up, as I can do more and more of this, I think the possibility of triggering people is like higher and higher, like reminding me that I need to be more and more compassionate and more patient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how would you handle a situation like this, where like your calmness is triggering to someone? Like how do you calm someone down, I guess, without
trying to control them?
Like when you're being calm, yeah, but like usually, like if I'm calming someone down, like a lot of what I'm doing is being calm and then letting them like naturally sync up to me, or like providing that safety security of like there's a calm person here who's paying attention to what's going on. But if some, like for me, like I run into this where people like get triggered by the calmness. They're like, you should be panicking, this is a whatever situation,
this is a climate crisis.
Whatever. It's a million things. There's a million examples of this, and I'm like, well, no, I think that we should, like, I'm fine to like look at this and deal with this, but like I'm not going to do this from a place of panic, you know, especially anything that's like long term. How do you manage that? Is this
how do you manage it?
Oh well.
Like, no, to Maija, how do you manage it?
I mean, like you can't always calm people down. It's not always something you can do. And then it's like, well, you may have to walk away, or you may have to tell the person to leave or something. But I feel like there isn't always a solution.
It's hard to hear sometimes, I think, like especially for like therapists or someone's really in pain and they're hurting, and then to I mean, if it's true, it's true, but like to have to like acknowledge that you can't help the person, or there isn't like necessarily a solution right now.
That's also something I talk about in my book, which I feel isn't talked about nearly enough, is that where very often when people think they are feeling compassion, they are in fact blending with parts that want to fix people or control people or something like that. And it can be like, they can really seem like compassion, like this part may offer like, hey, I want to help you, but it's really not about compassion. And if the person who's being helped is like, I would rather not have your help, or I would prefer a completely different kind of help, and then the helper gets very triggered and angry and resentful, or blames the person for being ungrateful or wanting to suffer or whatever. And this is like something that happens everywhere all the time. And I honestly feel like most people may not really know authentic compassion. They just know being blended with parts that are triggered by others' pain, or are triggered by not being able to help, or feel like they have to fix the whole world or whatever.
So how would you tell the difference? Like, how does it feel from the inside, and how does it look from the outside? Difference between someone who's compassionate and someone who's their helper part is taken over.
It's really about like, is it okay if this person doesn't want help, or if they don't want this type of help? Because very often people have a fixed idea of what is going to help this situation, and very often it's not what the person who's being helped feels like would be the actually helpful thing. So that's one way to find it out, whether you're the one helping or being helped.
This is something that I'm quite interested in. I have years ago, when I started the like I really dived into a new layer of personal development work, I found something like an archetype of the wounded healer, which is basically what you're talking about. The like, I want to help people, and then the like, I have so much drive to help people. And I thought I cleaned it up then, and then it's sort of like hanging around with me now. Like how, and so I have this like this drive to help people, right? And then it like occasionally I help people so much that I feel tired, and I'm like, wait, why am I doing this again? But I do still feel like I'm sort of like caught in a loop of helping. What? How would you work with this? Like I'm right here. Like how do I work with this? You know, I'm interested in new takes.
I feel like the most important thing is to recognize that this is what's going on, because honestly, I've had so many people tell me, like, people very often, these parts, they may say like that I'm a very empathetic person. This is just how I am. And there are like people who have told me that you're not allowed to talk about anything negative to me because I'm such an empathetic person that it will crush me. And it's a pretty funny idea that I'm so empathetic that I can't have anything to do with your stuff. So it's many people think that if they feel bad when someone suffers, it's automatically the same as compassion. Or if they want to help someone, it's automatically compassion, or because they're a good person.
Yeah, interesting. So then, like, I'm finding myself shackled by this part of me. Like, how do I, like, I can unblend, obviously, but how do I more deeply interact with this? And like what would you do with it, with the healer that maybe is overexerting itself?
Then you let the part know that you can help people also from self. You don't any like parts helping people or having the drive to help people. And the parts can be very reluctant. They can be like, well, but if I'm not doing this stuff, then you're not a good person, then you're not empathetic enough, then you're not whatever. But it's you can let the part know that it can just chill out and rest, and you can let yourself decide who you want to help and when and how.
Yeah, I think I have this experience of like a part that nags me, like, oh, we have to help, like, what about if we ask them this, you know? It's like, and then so I'm in sort of like a semi-self that I'm getting asked or like encouraged to, but then this part is kind of like naggy, and so if I don't ask, it like nags, and then I'm like, eventually I ask. Yeah,
I mean, it's fine. Like in general, IFS is not looking for perfection. For example, IFS may not get you in a state where you're never self-critical, for example. Simultaneously, like, yeah, you may have compassion from self, and then you may have some parts that are like, hey, you should help this person, so you're a good person and whatever. And then you recognize that, okay, I'm doing this 90% from like from self, and then there's 10% is coming from a part, and I will keep an eye on this part so it doesn't take over.
Okay, so you said the phrase being a good person, right? And so I guess sometimes I think about these things meditatively, like, oh, why don't I just give myself the like being a good person quality? Because I'm like, I can meditate and like sit on the like I am a good person, and then like be freed from the shackles of like desire to be a good person through various actions. I'm curious how you bring meditation into your practices and your working with people.
Yeah, so my main meditation practice ever since I started meditation has been metta, or loving kindness meditation. And I feel it really fits together with IFS because they're both kind of about the same thing. Like many people think that IFS is about like talking with your parts and negotiation. But for many people, IFS is really about like soothing and nurturing exiled parts of yourself. So loving kindness is very similar. It can be soothing and nurturing yourself and other people, but just inside your mind.
Right. So I'm interested in if metta and IFS go together, is there like an opposite practice that like is in the blind spot of these two? Do you have any like let me try and think of an example here. So maybe one example is like a type of meditation that does like sharp focus, and then a type of meditation that does like broad awareness. And these kind of like, these compete with each other a bit. But if you do both together, they're very powerful and end up with like both like minute detail and like massive broadness of awareness. And suddenly like something clicks with them and they're very powerful practices together. Do you have a sense, like, is metta missing its other demon work or something?
I don't really think metta is actually missing anything, because not only like from a Buddhist perspective, it combines concentration practice and insight practice. Well, concentration is not really like the best word, but you can also call it calm abiding and insight practice. And if you talk about the quality of attention, you can send metta to like a single part, or you can send it to the whole universe, or you can just do like objectless metta or non-dual metta, where it's really like it just everything is metta. So I don't really think it's missing anything at all.
Interesting. Good. I mean, like, okay, I seem to, when I work on metta, I have bottlenecks around metta. I have all these other cool practices. I have awareness practices, and I have body scans, and then like bottlenecks.
Obviously, it's good to do a lot of different practices, but I feel when it comes to meditation, I don't think there's really anything missing.
Yeah, I my journey was to like pick up a book and go like, oh, this is a really good practice, and get really excited and tell all my friends, and then like pick up another book the next week and go, this is really good, and tell all of my friends and get really excited, and then the next week pick up another book, and you know, eventually my friends started getting tired of
channel.
Right, just like over and over new practices, and oh, have you tried this, have you heard this one, they're like, what about this one, and like really enjoy the journey of like picking up new practices and trying them out. And so I just have like bucket loads of practices in my toolkit of like overlapping methods, and like, oh yeah, but this one like got to that stuff better, and then like this one was better at somatics, and then this one was better at like some cognitive stuff, and like and so I have like layers of overlap in my map of like which practices are useful, because sometimes
I mean, I do agree. Like I've done like probably a dozen different types of meditation, and I've done a lot of these more IFS like practices, and I've done body work and a lot of different stuff. But like when it comes to meditation, I feel like metta just has everything. And it's kind of like it's interesting for me, because I heard, when I first heard of this thing called loving kindness meditation, which was when I had never meditated. I didn't know what meditation really was. And I was like, okay, this sounds just like my thing. And then I didn't do anything about it for 2 years. And then I was like, okay, let's give it a shot. And then I did it once, and I was like, okay, this is exactly my thing. I'm going to do this forever. I will do this every day forever. Like the most me thing I've ever done.
Did you pick that up with like a community, or you picked it up on your own, or like how did you get into it?
I just Googled like, okay, guided loving kindness meditation. And I think, I ended up on YouTube and on Tara Brach's website, and I tried some guided ones.
Yeah, terrible.
And unusual because obviously when I started meditating, I didn't expect it to have an immediate effect. I thought, yeah, I will probably have to do it for a while before I notice anything. And a lot of people don't even, it takes them a while to even really feel the loving kindness. But for me, it was like this immediate, like, wow, I'm just sitting here, I'm completely soaked in love. Why isn't everyone doing this?
Yeah, I feel like I've been very lucky with my meditative journey, because if something worked, I was like, oh, this is working. And if it didn't, I'd be like, next practice. And so I like got this huge diversity of practices where they worked for a bit and then stopped working. And then I got a new one that worked for a bit and stopped working. And so I have this like this broad range of like attention or awareness, or anytime it stopped working, I was like, oh, I'm blocked. Like if I sat and meditated for an hour and nothing much seemed to, like, I didn't seem to have any insights or learn anything or feel like there was an effect, I'd just like drop that practice and try a new one. Like, time to find a new book, which meant that I was highly distractible, but also I tried all these practices and then I debugged my practice. I know other people who picked a single practice, like a Vipassana or something, and stuck at it for days or years. And I can like run rings around them with alternative methods and alternative practices just because I didn't sit still in one type of practice. I like had this variety of dancing around. So I'm like torn on whether I advise people to pick up a variety or like pick up a single practice and like deepen, because I know my journey was this variety and like eventually building up what I feel like is a good practice. But for a while there, just like trying all sorts of things.
I do feel like this approach of trying a lot of different stuff, I think it's very useful. But of course, and it's kind of funny that like many teachers really advise against it. Like, this is a really bad idea. You should only pick one practice. And then
and it's my practice. You should pick my practice.
Yeah, but it's also funny because if you like look at the bios of like famous Western Buddhist teachers, almost all of them have studied like Zen, Theravada, even like Hindu stuff. So most of the famous teachers are not like that at all.
Yeah, I mean, part of me thinks that people need to go on a journey, like just like I went on a journey, and in that sense, they should try out multiple practices so they can do that journey thing. And part of me is like, yeah, but I like came home to a particular practice in the end. Maybe I should just give them this practice. But I'm like, I get that as a philosophy, but I'm like, I lean on the like, no, people should go on a journey. The thing to do is to take your own journey and to find it in the world.
It's different for everyone, right? Because like there is this thing, like there is doing all this stuff is it can get scattered, or it can give you like perspective. And I think like you kind of want to have this balance of like being able to concentrate on something, but also not get locked into something.
I feel like there's someone out there who like wandered into a monastery on the off chance one day and then went, oh, this is my place, and dropped everything, and that was it for them.
Right. And if it just like resonates and you're feeling that inspiration and you just want to do the thing, then like there's like, yeah, to do that and recognize that you could do that for years and then do something else after. Right. Like just because it like I think often it feels like, especially like when we're younger, it feels like, oh, if I do this, I'm doing this forever and I'm never going to do anything. And this is giving my whole life. And it's like that for a little bit. and then you kind of often wake up and realize like, oh, actually, I can do this forever for a short period of time and then move on from there.
I'm interested in therapeutic, jumping back to therapeutic work for a moment. Sometimes I feel like there's an endless amount of stuff to work through. Like there's just more therapy work to do. And then sometimes I feel like, oh no, I've done a bunch of somatics and somatics doesn't feel relevant anymore. I wonder if you have a take on like, do we get done or like more done, or is there just endless amounts of therapy to do on ourselves?
I put it like this: it's possible to heal all your trauma, and yet there's also an endless process. And this is a contradiction, but all of this stuff is a contradiction anyway. But I was at the point about 2 years ago where I had healed like all my trauma, and of course it doesn't mean I had healed all my parts, or like I had no issues or patterns or anything. But I felt like I was in a situation where I had healed everything I called trauma. But then I met a lot of very unstable friends, and then I developed a lot of new trauma. And it's like a situation that's not really talked about very much, that you heal all your trauma, but then you get a bunch of new stuff.
It's the slings and arrows of every day.
Yeah, you can still get hurt again. Like, in fact, it's even once you've healed the past stuff, you may be open again, knowing that you can get your heart broken, open to falling in love again. Like, and you should be open to falling in love again. And also, this time, knowing you'll get your heart broken doesn't make it any easier to do it.
Yeah. But it also, there's this thing where you, for example, heal a certain trauma, but it's still, even though it's fully healed, but it's still easier for you to like redevelop the same trauma.
I'm curious if do you have a sense of what was the difference for you between like the states of working on these traumas and the states of like feeling like it mostly you hit the nail on the head for many of them, and there's still work to do, but it wasn't super traumatic? Like, what is it like to be in this new place?
Yeah, it's I guess the thing is that people kind of like we talked about, the way that your in self can trigger people. So there's this kind of like, I guess I have this idea that, hey, most of my friends are super traumatized, but when I heal my trauma, then our friendship will be very like harmonic and stuff, because I won't get triggered by their antics and stuff like that. And then it turned out it doesn't really work. like some of my friendships actually got much worse because of the dynamic of me being in self. So yeah, obviously there was a lot of good and positive stuff, but I didn't really expect. I expected it to fix more, and I didn't expect to make some things even worse.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, wow. I'm like, I want to know more. I want to know more about the like when people go on a therapeutic journey. Like, I even have a friend right now. He's like, "Will I ever recover?" Right? I feel like they're looking for, what will the future look like? Like if I recover, how am I gonna be? How am I gonna know I've recovered? Do you have I'm trying to like wonder about that vision. Like, what is the vision of like more recovered look like?
I think for a lot of people, like most of my friends, as I said, have been very traumatized and very dissociated. And also people I have guided, like have included a lot of people with stuff like schizophrenia and dissociative identity disorder. And a lot of, so that means that a lot of them have been very, like, they have been suffering a lot since their childhood. And they don't know really who they are, because they feel like, I'm just a container for trauma and suffering. How could I even get better, because there is no me, there is just this trauma. And then it's important to kind of return the framework that we're not returning you back, obviously, because you're 30, we're not returning you back.
You don't become a 5-year-old.
That's not going to happen, and it wouldn't make any sense. We're not restoring you to your non-traumatized self. You're creating a new you. And I think it's pretty cool that we can just, create a new person. And I don't know who that person is going to be, but I think it will be pretty cool.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. I like the let's grow. It's like there's the perfect. I'm gonna go for perfect baby. Hasn't received any traumas. It's probably received a few from being born, because that's pretty confusing for anyone.
That's a whole
but then hasn't got the rest of being a teenager and arguing with your friends and getting bullied in school. Hasn't got any of that. We don't take you there. We on top of all the things you've done, we take you to sideways. How do you want to live with the fact that all of this stuff has happened to you? It's pretty cool.
But you really kind of have to make it like an adventure, or it's like a journey of discovery that it really sucked that you were treated like that you have spent decades struggling with trauma and dissociation and stuff like that. But now you get to both discover who you are and simultaneously make yourself into the person who you want to be.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's what do you call that process? It's like
self-rediscovery
or something, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you can call it self-discovery, but it's also some people use the word self-actualization. I mean, you can just call it healing.
I'm interested in, is there do you have a sense of, will this person end up someone different if we do the therapy work in a different order? If someone's I've got these 3 major life events that happened to me, and they come to you and they say, which one should I do first? What do you do? Or do you think they'll end up in a different place if we do them in a different order?
I think they will always, for example, if you use IFS, or if you use SE, or if you use a different type of therapy, or if you go to this therapist, or if you go to that therapist, or even if you go to this therapist now, or if you just waited for 5 years and went to the same therapist, this is probably going to be a different process. And I guess it's inevitable that you will also end up a different person.
Do you have a sequence? If someone's I've got 3 major life therapies, life traumas, I don't know which one to go for first, what do you suggest? How would you guide them to decide?
I would usually just start with whatever is the most present right now. And especially a lot of traumatized people, if someone's body is really full and buzzing with one trauma, then you usually have to heal it first before you even get to the other type of trauma.
Start with what feels more top of the stack.
Yeah, but of course, this is always a bit guesswork, and it may turn out very often it turns out that someone says, I have this major trauma, I have that major trauma, and this was also quite important. And then when you do some work together, it turns out that they actually have 5 other major trauma they forgot about or didn't think that they were very important.
Yeah, I've occasionally stumbled into a childhood memory and then gone, oh shit, this is actually, I thought it was mild, but actually I took a lot of damage in this moment of being rejected by my peers or something. Oh no, that actually hit. Ouch. I'm curious. So something I found in my journey is that I started with maybe the more recent experiences, and then gradually moved younger and younger in my things that happened longer and longer ago, until it felt like there was generally less and less of my history was stepping into my everyday and haunting me. I'm curious if you've found that as well. Is there a chronology to healing as in your perspective? or is it just things come up and we work on them, whatever's more urgent?
I think, yeah, there's definitely at least some truth to that idea. And like with some people I work with, they initially don't really seem to have child parts, which is interesting. They have like teen parts, and then when you work with them more, then they also start to have child parts.
Then they have 9-year-old parts, and then they have 5-year-old parts, and then they have baby parts, and like, oh, huh. And then the teenage parts are like not coming up anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so something that I have this wild, crazy theory that sort of different types of therapy work better for the stuff that happens at different ages. And so I would put IFS as older than somatic with some overlap, but like teenage parts you can do with IFS. I don't feel like somatic work is a teenage thing. I feel like a 0 to 5 is more somatic. Is that something you found?
Well, my own trauma was like more than 90% of my own trauma was caused in my 30s. And so, yeah, I guess that the idea that somatics is for childhood stuff only doesn't really resonate with me. But I guess in that sense, like, yeah, like if you work with very, very young parts, then they may not be able to talk, or then you may have to work with somatic stuff and not IFS.
Right. That's kind of like the phrase pre-episodic. Like if you don't remember the episode, the time sequence of what happens, chances are you can access the experience somatically, that like how you felt in the body as it went, and sort of like work through it there without the memory episode. I'm curious if you have other therapies. Like I have in the on the back burner, sort of behind me, I have like holotropic breath work for like the rebirthing process. If someone has like done other work and they're like, but how do I get to like working on like a fairly traumatic birth experience, I'd be like, go there to holotropic breath work and do that one. I'm curious if you have other therapies that line up with your somatics and your IFS that like kind of like stack up with it.
Yeah, well, then there's imaginal practice, and of course these are not like distinct categories. Like sometimes even with IFS and somatic work, it's hard to say which one you're doing. And imaginal practice, I mean, SE is a form of imaginal practice, but I also do more like free form imaginal practice, which works on like emotional, somatic, energetic, and then more sensory level.
Okay, so can you say more about imaginal practice?
Yeah, so this is also, some people call these shamanic journeys, even if like traditionally shamanic journeys involve altered states that are induced with drumming or dancing or maybe weird plants or mushrooms. But you can also do shamanic journeys without any explicitly induced altered states. But the word shamanic carries some baggage because it comes from thousands of years old indigenous traditions. So in that sense, imaginal practice is a bit more neutral. But it's about exploring the body and the energy body, and you can explore images or words or pretty much anything. And I feel like it can be very kind of, because it's very creative. Imaginal practice has no rules. And because we talked about how some people have very rigid ideas of what IFS is or what SE is. And when I started doing imaginal practice, then I found out that it really made my therapeutic work more creative. Because I wasn't really thinking like in a framework, like what am I allowed to do here, what is possible to do here. Because imaginal practice, it doesn't work with the word possible. Everything is possible.
So you mentioned energy bodies. Can you see energy bodies? Like, do you have a visual perception of energy bodies?
I don't get energy visuals, though with the exception, I can sometimes see people's IFS parts, but this is super weird.
Right. And my next question was, wait, okay, then what do you see or what do you perceive when working with people?
If I do something like IFS or imaginal practice or whatever, I feel the stuff in my own body. For example, if someone is angry, I get a certain type of like muscle spasms in my body.
Right. And you said you see parts. Do you feel like you can see exactly what they describe, or are you seeing possibly more than that?
Like, sometimes if there's a part that the person hasn't described yet in any way, and then I can see the part and then they describe it, and it's pretty freaky. But this doesn't happen very often, and it only happens with like my closest friends.
That's cool. You can start to see the parts before they can. I want that power.
Because sometimes I also can hear the inner monologue of parts, but this is like super weird woo stuff, and people will probably, like a lot of listeners will be like, no, I don't buy that.
I mean, I'm okay with super weird woo stuff and calling it super weird woo stuff and still wanting to talk about it, because there's a possibility there of like really powerful intuitive work, because there's a perception that you're like, obviously you're like, I don't know if this is even true, but it feels like I'm saying this. And the person goes like, it is saying that. How did you do that? You could hear my parts. And like, even that's really powerful if you can like offer the part some like, someone can hear it, even if, you know, the person in their system wasn't paying attention. Like, I'm over here as the therapist, able to hear your parts for you occasionally.
Yeah, but this has been very freaky with some people, and like some people I guide who have like a materialist worldview, so they know that I can sense their emotions even if they are not like consciously, like even if the person, like if this is audio only and the person isn't saying anything, I can still sense what's going on, and they are like, okay, I accept that this is happening, but I don't believe in energy, so I don't know how this is happening.
Yeah, I have a general rule of like, yeah, okay, let's just do the therapy, and then after we'll decide like which worldview this fits into. Like, don't prejudge your worldview as to like we can only do therapy in a materialist way. Like, let's just do the process, and then like at the end we go like, that was weird, but hey, I feel way better. So no judgments.
Yeah, I once guided Essie for someone who's a very scientific materialist, and then I accidentally used the word energy, and I was like, oops.
Yeah,
It works.
It's so funny how like we'll reject like or like people will reject the term energy, but like if you say like, oh, my 7-year-old has too much energy, they know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, like people talk about vibes, and of course vibes are energy.
Vibes,
yeah.
It would be funny if instead of vibes we just actually said vibrations.
Right. I mean, that's even worse. Like,
vibrations are too woo for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like,
unless they're describing the vibration, they're like, oh, this has like a sine wave, or like it's like a high trough, or it's like the frequency. I like that one sometimes.
Yeah. Me and Daniel, we had a video where we talked about different types of energy as well. And there's the like this quality of like, I'm sleepy, I don't have energy. And then there's a different quality of like, I'm hungry, I want energy, right? And they're like, there's a whole different bunch of different buckets of different shaped like energy. And like, we kind of overload energy into like a whole bucket, like, but it does seem like there's also different types of energy, and people kind of know what you mean of various, like sugar energy, right? It's like, there's definitely a thing there that is different to the like sleepy, or like I just woke up, I'm full of energy.
Oh, that guy
Yeah.
took too much meth.
Meth energy, different energy again, right?
Yeah, and like everyone knows the feeling of going to a place and that place has bad vibes.
It's like the haunted house energy. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I mean, it may or may not be a haunted house. There may or may not be ghosts here, but it's totally got that energy of haunted. Yeah, super interesting. I mean, like, I love working with on the edge of what I understand as well. That's like, it's important to me that I shouldn't be the one who knows everything in the room. I should have some mystery or some space or some possibility for other things to surprise me. So, okay, so we can sometimes see parts. Do you have other intuitions that you use as you're working with people that guide you in like what to ask next or which type of therapy to use? Or
I mean,
like, how do you
everything about doing this kind of work is intuition, because yeah, there are IFS books that go like you should do this and then you ask this, but I'm like, no, that's not what I do. Everything works by intuition.
Okay, like, can you talk more about like how do you let your intuition just do that? Like, I know it might be hard to describe, but like, what is that like, letting your intuition lead you? What does that look
Yeah,
like?
or like maybe we can invite the intuition into the conversation.
That'd be cool.
As a part.
Yeah, I guess I'm not very good at describing what it feels like. It's just intuition is kind of it's a sense, but it's also intuition is created by, you know, like having experience, having skills. Like you can't have IFS intuition if you're just starting out because you don't really know how this stuff works. So a part of intuition is just doing this for hundreds of hours and learning stuff, and you will learn a lot of stuff that's not really like how do I say it? It's really like subconscious, that your mind might just notice that when people's eyes blink like that, that means this, and you may not have any conscious knowledge of knowing this, but something in your body knows, and then that comes off as intuition.
And then
Yes.
like kind of like the visions and stuff you were talking about before, or the hearing the people's voices, but also like that's really woo and hard to talk about. So you want to balance that it's not too, it doesn't like I'm noticing like there is this like sort of like boundaries almost, so that we're not spiraling off into just inside our own head. There is still like keeping us grounded.
But yeah, this is all of this stuff is very much about intuition, and also something like hypnosis is very, especially in hypnosis, it's nice if you get to do it in real life and not on Zoom, because then you can better really pay attention to like the person's not just body language, but like their breathing rhythm and stuff like that. So it's really like intuition is like a combination. It's a combination of perception and your like skill in intuition and the skill in whatever it is that you're doing.
And so something that I do when I sit with people is that I can activate my body into in the classic set of like fear, anger, and sadness. And as I like, I maybe even before I activate my body, there's like a test, like, do I feel comfortable going there in front of witnessing by this person? And this is like, for me, there's like a litmus test of like, does this person feel comfortable with anger, right? Because if I'm like, oh, I can just work up my anger and like feel very free to feel angry here, I'll be like, oh, this person's really comfortable with anger. But as I like try and activate my anger and it like says, no, this isn't gonna work, this is a bad idea, I'm like, oh, this person is very uncomfortable with anger. And so I have this like sensing capacity that can feel into where the other person is by like self-activation. I'm wondering if you have that capacity, like can you sense where another person is by using your own system?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I do it the same way. At least I think it's really like I would say that anger comes up in almost every session I guide, though sometimes the person I'm guiding doesn't know this, even though I know this. But it's like anger is such a like a fundamental emotion, and it's funny when sometimes people like start guiding and this person says like, I don't have anger. I'm not an angry person. I just don't have it.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, I think we'll be fine. Quite a lot of anger.
What's this? Why is this anger here? Like, no, they're not gonna enjoy that. They're not gonna be able to be present to like me like ripping up with a bunch of anger.
Yeah. But I would say that anger is present in almost every session, and it's perfectly fine. But of course, it may not be perfectly fine for the person.
Yeah. That resonates too much for me.
I feel like there's something interesting there of like setting our own containers. Like the client should be able to like define the container that they feel safe in. Maybe if they can't articulate it so well, but like maybe they just don't have to feel comfortable in front of anger right now, or in front of their own anger, or you know, whatever. But also, I would like people to have more capacity to be with all of their emotions. That's like sneaky selfish drive of mine, that people can learn what their emotions are and be more present with them.
Yeah, but anger is definitely like I've recently realized I still had some like remnants left, like of this holding this idea that anger is bad, because this society really manages to, and I guess it's also gender related to your gender, but yeah, male anger is bad but in a different way, and female anger is bad in another way. And it's very, very hard to get to like a point where you can be like, oh, I have anger, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'm like reminded of this this quality of like high school movies. So many of the high school movies are about the underdog in high school, right? They're like, I'm the nerd character with my like little nerd gang, and we're like the underdogs in the school, and then that's just what the world is like, right? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then like after a while, I noticed a lot of the movies about high school are about this particular pattern. And then I turned around and looked at high school, and I was like, well, I like this pattern because I felt like the underdog in high school with my little nerd group that was cool but not too cool, but only cool to me. And then I went, wait a second, does everyone feel this way? Did everyone feel like they were the underdog in high school with their little nerd group that they were just kind of getting by? Why is this a thing? Why does everyone feel that way through high school? And it's not 100%, but it's like 90% of people, or 95% had their little clique, and the other groups that seem to like victimize them, and the like couple of people that they victimized a little bit or dismissed. Like, what? Is this a universal experience? Yeah. All right, I have a different question. I want to go back a bit. So we talked a lot about a lot of what we've talked about is like interior, like exploring the interiors, like changing the interiors, like working through things on the interior. And then we also made this mention to like the Sangha, the community, like the exterior. There's some quality of exterior that is supportive of growth and development and health. How much and how do you balance interior and exterior when working with people? Like, how much is it like, oh, you need to work on the diet in the exterior, and how much is it you need to fix these parts and so they're not constantly hungry or something?
I guess my own perspective is very different from the perspective of most people I know, because I'm very extroverted, like very, very extroverted, while most people I know are the exact opposite, and they tend to be very emotionally avoidant. So it's really like, I know a lot of people with the mindset like, oh, it would be nice to go to a cave to meditate for 3 years, so then I wouldn't have to think about my real world problems.
Meditate in a cave. I could do with a holiday as well. I don't know how long I'd stay on holiday.
I love
but
meditating in random
a
places.
lot of other people use spirituality as like an escapism and like not having to be themselves, not having to be with other people, not having to be in their bodies. And that's not really something I've done much of, but it's like it feels like real shame that meditation is seen as a purely solitary activity. And I think most people don't even know that there are types of meditation where you're literally talking with someone else. And I feel like this can be much more helpful because you're kind of simultaneously practicing and also like interacting with another human being.
I find it very stabilizing. It's like any idiosyncrasies with me, if I'm by myself, they get magnified, but they often get lost within other people or groups of people. Like it's more data, almost more processing.
But it's really like I feel like there's nothing that gives you more wisdom than talking with other people. Like no amount of like sitting on the cushion is going to give you the same amount and kind of wisdom that you can gain from talking with a lot of different people.
Is there, I'm curious in terms of relational practices, is there practices you'd want like everyone to try? Like everyone should at least try this practice.
I think it's more like everyone should try relational practices in general.
Okay, the whole category.
There are, for example, people like Rosa Lewis, who teaches imaginal practice. She calls it a form of meditation. And I wouldn't necessarily call it a meditation, but it also may not really matter. But it's a very good relational practice, and also imaginal practice you can do with two people. You can do it in a group of like, I don't know, maybe up to 8 people or something. And it's more like mutually shared. It's not like IFS. It's usually one person is guiding the other. But these are more like shared, and there's not necessarily one person guiding. But with meditation, there are practices like inside dialogue, which I haven't really done very much of, but I feel it's very compelling. And then I've done a lot of 2-person inquiry in the past, and I feel that's a super powerful practice. It's not really very relational, even though it's 2 people, but it's extremely powerful.
Interesting.
So basically inquiry, like a lot of people know Ramana Maharshi's inquiry, which is just asking yourself, who am I? But it's actually possible to use a lot of different questions for this. And it works so much better when someone asks you the question and then you try to answer. Of course, it's hard, but you try to put your inner experience into words. So it's not like super interactive. It's one person asking questions and the other person narrating their experience. But somehow, just like with IFS, narrating your own experience can be super powerful.
Very interesting. I'm like, maybe I should try some more relational practices myself. I'm like a busy guy. I run like 5 groups already, but I'm like, maybe I should do another one. Okay, I got another question. So you've written a book recently, last week. You said last week, and I was like, oh, last week.
It was actually, I misspoke. It was released 1.5 weeks ago, but anyway, very recently.
Cool. Tell us about the book.
Yeah, so the book is called Loving Awakening, and it talks about a lot of the stuff that we have been talking about, such as meditation, IFS, somatic practices, imaginal practice, shared practices, and also some stuff that we haven't yet discussed, such as body work and the side effects of spiritual practice, which I feel is an important subject.
I'm interested in the side effects of spiritual practice. Can you share some of the side effects? You get incredibly handsome, and then you're
Spoilers.
Yeah, I guess the problem is, if we talk about psychedelics, everyone, or at least almost everyone, has heard that if you don't have a good setting, you might get a bad trip and you feel really awful, and it might take you a while to recover from that. But with meditation, a lot of people think that's completely harmless. And unfortunately, meditation can also cause bad trips, but they can last for months or years. And yeah, then it's like you can't have a good setting for months or years.
Yeah, interesting. The setting for life. I mean, ideally, you want like your setting for life to be like a good setting, but also there's going to be bumps, and it's going to need work.
Yeah,
at various instances.
Basically, there are different types of side effects. One is, for example, that if you have mental illness like OCD or anxiety, or you just ruminate everything, these kind of traits can get worse. But you can also get physical symptoms, also known as Kundalini symptoms, which can sometimes be quite severe and very freaky. Then there are dark nights, which are these periods that can sometimes last for months or years, where you just feel like everything really sucks. And then there are others, like one thing that's not mentioned very often is that if you practice something like Buddhist meditation, it's not meant as a relaxation practice. It's not meant for stress relief. It's not meant for productivity. It's meant to dismantle your whole idea of reality. And that can be quite stressful, and it can turn your whole life around. And it's often also nice, but there's no guarantee it will be nice and not just suck a lot.
That's like, I mean, I hear it talked about the warning labels that really should be on the front of meditation. Not like meditate and then like you'll be more productive, but like also, by the way, you can be depersonalized by meditation. you can just like be very.
Yeah, I should have mentioned trauma is, if you have a lot of trauma, if you have a lot of dissociation, you definitely have a much higher risk of getting severe side effects. Like I've witnessed quite a lot of psychosis. Like one case happened in front of me, and it was quite freaky. So it's not really like, it's like, this is not some small stuff. I'm not talking about like having a headache or feeling a bit cranky. Sometimes this stuff can really be like it can wreck your entire life. And some people don't like when others talk about this because it's, it's so negative and stuff. But we have to talk about this stuff.
I heard a story. I don't know why the story is coming up now, but I heard a story of someone, this is 30, 40, 50 years ago. They got a book on like working with inner child. And the book had this exercise of you write with your dominant hand, and then you write with your non-dominant hand to like represent the child part. And of course, in your non-dominant hand, the writing is like big and chunky, like a kid writes. And you have this like discussion conversation with like, what's it like being you as a child? And this person like got their friend to like, hey, come try this out with me. And they both sat down and started writing. And then like my friend was just like had an interesting conversation, and she said the other person like had a mental breakdown, like discovered like all of the pain of childhood that had been bottled up by accidentally trying this technique. and like had a mental breakdown, no longer friends anymore, like cut ties, like freaking out, like yeah, sometimes these techniques can really rip off that band-aid. I suspect that when it comes to trauma, we have all of these systems set up to like box it in and to like keep it under control because we're trying to survive out here. And then to like sometimes to meditate is to open those boxes, especially if we're unprepared, opening a box that I didn't intend to open, and or like dismantling my like protective box, which meditation sometimes does. Oh, I notice I seem to be like repressing. Like, well, that's weird. I wonder what's like, you're like, bam, no more repression. Like all of the feelings, right? Feels like, you know, on the one hand, I think that bodies can handle emotions, especially if we're set up for it. And also like, maybe there's just a lot of feelings there and this might take a while.
Yeah, and it's really like sometimes people can't handle this because there are too many stories. Like, yeah, I've seen too many cases of psychosis, but there are also like sometimes people commit suicide or something. These can be very, very severe effects. And also, like, I would assume that people think, well, if meditation causes side effects, then I will stop. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work. Once you got the train running, you may stop practicing, but it may not help. So it's really like shitty. I remember when I've had some really bad times in the past. I said to some friends, like, this is fucked up. Like, if you start taking heroin, you can at least quit it.
Right. Whereas if you meditate and you like tick on some process of like deconstruction in the mind, and you like deconstruct everything, like you can't turn it off so easily until it's done. Which is you know, they say about stream entry, better not to start once started, better to finish on the meditative schools. Like keep going.
Yeah, but it's really, there's like finishing doesn't really help. There's no such point that you cross that then you're like, oh, I'm finished now, everything is great. No.
This might be good.
Imagine, like we're talking all these negative and stuff going on, but like I like where I am now, I can't imagine not doing it.
Wait. I know you were depressed at one point, right? Like yeah. And now you're like, now that you've like gone on a journey and you feel better about the whole thing, you're happy to have gone through it.
Yeah, like I can't yeah, like I can't imagine what it would have been like to live a life not doing this. Like it sounds very unpleasant. But yeah, I mean, it's like I love this stuff. Like this stuff is great. Like, you know, you talked about the depression. Like the other day I got like depressed, but it was and I just like I was just able to experience depression for like 20 minutes, and then, you know, something happened and I was sad and depressed and didn't feel like doing anything, and then it just finished, and then I moved on with my life. And like that's like I don't think that's possible without like these kind of things that we're doing, like without being able to like reconstruct like all of reality. It makes the depression so much smaller. Just it's like a part of life versus before it was life.
Like overwhelming as a force in life.
Not even overwhelming. Like now things are overwhelming, but it's like I can see them being overwhelming. Before It just was like I didn't have depression, I was depression.
Like overtaking, like it absolutely overtook you, and that was just it.
Yeah, like this is just what reality is. Just like reality is depressed. Like reality is this thing. Like there is no care, there's nothing like that. That's just how things are. But like not even like the words I'm saying. Like it's just I was just inside it, and that's how things are. And now, like, yeah, that happens to me sometimes. Like I still get overwhelmed sometimes, but it's like I'm experiencing overwhelmedness. And like the other day I was like, there was like a lot of stuff going on, And so I'm like, okay, well, like I just need, like I'm gonna sit down and take a minute. And just like sitting down and taking a minute in middle of a rush and pressure and everything is like objectively not the right move. But like the objective reality matters less than my ability to handle it.
Mm.
And so like even if I'm like I'm paying tribute to, you know, my Buddha nature or something, you know, however you want to, you know, whichever perspective you're going to take, but like I get to live life and I get to live it like on my own terms, and I get to live it, you know, relatively well. And like there's nothing really that's worth, there's nothing really that's like worth more than that. Like, what are you here if you're not here to like do the best you can or something,
Or enjoy your life?
Yeah, or enjoy it, or you know, do what's right, you know, however it is that you want to, whatever words you want to use for that.
Mm.
And so like I don't agree with it's best not to start. I agree with like it
I would like to refer to the meme image of the plane with red dots. It's really like, it's kind of people's views are always informed by their current experience, but it's like in a parallel universe, there might be a version of you that had like a psychotic breakdown from meditation for 2 years, and you might feel differently. And like I know people who really wish they wouldn't have started.
Mm. Oh, yeah, I can see that. The like, at the same time, I kind of viewed it as like the paradox of like, you probably, given that you are alive, you probably did start already. like secretly, like now that you've started, better keep going. But also there is no one that hasn't started, or like possibly the proposal for stream entry is like one of the versions of starting is the discovery of suffering. Like, when did you first discover suffering? Oh, like when I was shortly after I was born, or like, you know, there's a process of re-recognizing suffering over and over and over and over, and then like realizing, oh, like I can suffer in reality. That stinks. I hate that. Like that's the start. So yeah, I don't know about that. We always started long ago somehow.
Yeah, that's another thing about this, is it doesn't always feel like I've started it. Like it didn't feel like I started this path. Like it's like I've always been doing it.
Right.
And I'm just, you know, able to focus on it better.
Right. That's a like, that's, I suspect there's a mystery here of like, how could I have like why have I always been on this path? And at the same time, it seems like somehow there's a meditative shift. There's the thing called stream entry, right? There does seem like people consciously started meditating and then like clicked into a thing. For me, by the time I was looking at books on meditation, I looked at my past and I realized I'd already like started the journey ages ago before I knew what the journey was. But it's like, did we ever start the spiritual journey? The same thing. Like the harder you look, the longer you realize that it probably started ancestrally multi-generations back. We've always been on and part of the journey of being alive. All right. I feel like this is a good time to wrap. Maija, would you like to join us in saying Psychotechnologies live?
Okay.
Psychotech 3, 2, 1. Psychotechnologies live.